Hey, my name is Moorea Masa, and I'm talking arts and crafts with Bo. I am a musician, an artist, a fierce protector of women, a teacher, a lover, I don't know, an activist. Yeah, I think that's a good little.
I think that's a sufficient list.
Yeah. I think that I go through different phases. So I think that there are some people that like just create all the time, and I definitely have this balance of like being a creative and needing to pay my rent at the end of the day. And also a desire to continue to spread music in larger capacities. I think that's ultimately what my goal is, but yeah, I also have to eat. But so I go through different phases. Like the last year, I was super creative and just making a record, and my daily process would be, maybe hours a day writing and playing music, along with teaching and touring and singing with other people. And then there are times where I feel like I'm only creating, and then other times where I'm soaking things in a lot. So like I haven't written a song in months, and I think there's tons of things brewing, and there's lots of little things here and there that I have, but it feels like I'm like taking it in, and also maybe more in the like business part of things where I'm like preparing to release a record. So I feel like a lot of my days are spent with emailing, and I was actually just talking about this with my manager today. I was like, I am so excited. I have a couple weeks or 2 weeks of doing a little tour coming up. Like I'm just so excited to get out there and play, because I feel like sometimes it's easy for me to get wrapped up in like talking with other business people all day, and it starts to feel really draining, and also can be discouraging, I think, when you're like not engaging with the people who actually care about your music, but you're engaging with just business people. So yeah, my days look completely different every day. I'm not a structured musician, and I don't know that you find many structured musicians, but I kind of do the hustle of like everything. I teach voice workshops, I teach songwriting, I sing backup for other people, lots of different genres. I do studio work, I play people's weddings, and do all sorts of weird things, and then I try to do my own thing at the forefront of it all. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, totally.
And it is hard to find this balance that you're like, whatever that is, of like, sometimes I go into a mode where I'm like, I need to book a tour, and that's all I'm thinking about, and I have to send lots of emails, and then it's hard for me to shut that off and then just play music or like just be creative. I do it, but it sometimes feels a little more forced. And then once I get into that place, I can get into it, but the like transition between the two is really awkward a lot of times. Yeah, but I try to remind myself that there is a flow of things, and sometimes I'm not as creative, I'm just taking things in, and then there are other times where like that's all I want to do is be creative, and then I make that just the priority, and I put all my energy into that, and then I'm like, okay, yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been singing since I could talk, and writing little ditties since forever. I have like books of poems and lyrics and songs that I made when I was like 5 years old or whatever. That's just like always something I've done. And I started performing pretty young, but I started my first band when I was 15 and was in that band for 6 years. And
do you mind me asking what that? Or
yeah, the band was called the Ruby Pines. And it was me and this guy who was a guitar player, and yeah, he was like 13 or 14 years older than me, and I was like just this little girl like doo-doo-doo. And we played gigs, and I did that for a long time, and we made an album, and then I left and started doing my own thing. And like, I've just always done music. I've never done anything else. I feel very lucky to do that, but I've just kind of always known that that's what I wanted to do and was gonna do, and I was like, okay, I'll be poor the rest of my life. I'm just gonna make music.
Teaching just come out of that naturally, or
what
prompted that?
Yeah, I had a friend who decided to move, and she had a whole roster of students, and I was like, I want to try to get into teaching a little bit. And she was like, well, this is the perfect opportunity. I'll recommend that they go to you.
Oh, wow.
And she kind of set me up. It was like pretty amazing. She set me up with like 12 or more of her students. And then I teach voice workshops, which I had somebody who was interested in taking a workshop and had like 7 women that all wanted to do a workshop, and they just needed a teacher, and somebody recommended me, and so then I started from there and have been just doing these voice workshops. Yeah.
I've like screenshotted them and sent them to Tyson. So what's this weekend look like?
Yeah, birthday present. I love teaching. I think it takes a lot of presence to be like, especially teaching voice. I think one of the most vulnerable things you can do is sing. And so you have to be really, really present with people. You have to hold a lot of space. And I think maybe the one challenging, but it's still really rewarding to me. But it takes a lot of energy. And I don't know, there are times where I'm like, I don't have much space to give people. And then you go into it and you might be a little hesitant, and then you get there and it's like such a good reminder that music isn't about you and your ego. It's way more than that, and I end up just feeling really grateful that I have the opportunity to share that space with people. It can be challenging for that, but I don't know, it's mostly like really incredibly rewarding. Well, I talk about this with my students all the time. I was lucky enough to just be singing from a really young age, and I had no inhibition around it. And I didn't have parents who like told me not to, or they also didn't make it like a big thing. It was just like something I loved, and I did all the time. I sang at the top of my lungs all the time. Like, it drove my parents. There would be sometimes my dad would be like, Moorea, please, Moorea, it's so loud. Please, I'm trying to, sleep or focus or whatever, it was like, and I would be like, I'm sorry. And then like 5 minutes later, I'd be like, wow, like singing at the top of my lungs again. It's just something I did, and I tried, and I tell my students this all the time. It's like, you have to make a lot of mistakes. You have to sound really bad. And I think as you get older, it's harder and harder to do that. It's like, I hear, oh, my roommates, or I don't want to be hurt by this person, or I don't want to be seen by this person. It's like, you have to do that. You have to make a lot of ugly sounds to sort of get to know your voice. You have to explore all the different aspects of it. And I started going to this teacher when I was 12. It was a gospel pastor in town, and his approach has shaped, I think, the way that my relationship with music is like more than anybody in my life. And he had a really unconventional approach to music, and he would just have me. It was all about the emotion of music. And my mom would come to my lessons, and there'd be a song I'd be singing that would be about her, and he'd have me sing it to her in her eyes, like this far away from her, like over and over again, and like not look away. And he'd have me like, and everybody in the room would be like sobbing, and like it would be like a really intense experience. But I think it's part of, like, for me it was very healing, and also showed me at a really young age that music could be used as a way to process your emotions and as a way to communicate to others and as a way to relate to others, and that being vulnerable in music was the like way that you would be more impactful and more successful with your music would be, or you know, I mean success not in a like financial way, but because to me the goal with music is to like reach people and to feel connected to people and have people be moved. So when I say successful, that's what I mean by it. It was just to be more vulnerable with yourself and more open to others. And I just like learned from a really young age that music could be a really powerful tool to do that. And it's bigger than you. I think that's a good thing to remember. It's bigger than your ego and like, you know, what, and your perception of what it is to you. It's like so much more than that. More and more recently, I've been experiencing this and like wanting to share this, that it's like a really vulnerable process to put yourself out there. And I think so many people want to appear like cool and calm and collected, and that it's just a vulnerable process, I think, for everybody. And I feel very vulnerable even just like releasing anything or putting myself out there, and I'm so grateful and glad to do it, and I'm glad I have the opportunity to do it. And it's I think vulnerability is an awesome thing, so I always strive for that. But yeah, that it's vulnerable for me too. I think that's important for other people to know. But it's worth it still, I think. Yeah. One thing that I like struggled a lot in my life, in my childhood, and I think music, like I was saying about my experience with the pastor at the gospel church, is like, you know, like music has been like a way for me to process and connect with people and to like feel a greater purpose beyond my own struggles and myself, and that I would hope other people could feel that through the music that I make. I don't know, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I think I have the same fears as, I mean, everybody, you know, we all fear the same thing. You know, there's the like really petty fears that I think that I try to squash on a daily basis, that we all have those voices that tell us, you know, you're not good enough, or, you know, what if this is too vulnerable or too much for people, or we all have that. So I definitely face those fears often, and I think I do a pretty good job most of the time squashing them pretty quickly, but you know, there are times where that totally gets to me, I think, like everybody. Yeah. And then on a grander scheme, I just like have a fear for our society and where we're at today, and our environment, and how our environment is hurting so bad, and how the people that we have in power, and those things definitely bring fear to my daily life. And I also try to squash that fear and like continue to work through it and like do what I can to make it better. Yeah. But yeah, I like think about like what my children might face, or like what my children's children might face, and that freaks me out.
What are those like counter moves that when you hear it pop in your head, or when you turn on the news and are just aware of the state of affairs? Like, what are those things that either help you address them or that help you find peace? Yeah.
It's funny because I help people get through their fears and like move through their fears on a daily basis when I teach. And so I have like a set of things that I tell people, you know, like that I remind people.
I know how to do this.
Yeah. So I try to come back to that place. I try to remind myself again, and I've said this like a couple of times now, that it's so much bigger than me. 'Cause like, you know, like sometimes you play a show you're like, man, that was horrible. Was anybody listening? Like, what, oh man, I messed up. I was so in my head, blah, blah, blah. Then you get off stage and you have like somebody that comes up to you crying and it's just like, that's what I needed in my day. And you're like, God, this is so not about me and how I feel. Like, it's just not. And so that's just, I think, a really good reminder when I start to have the insecurities of like, is this too much? Am I not enough? All these things. I think to remind myself that it's not about me is really important. And then the other thing that I remind myself is that the more vulnerable I am and like the more authentic I am, like the more, because I think authenticity and vulnerability is looked down upon in our society, and what a lot of like powers would like to try to kill. And I think the more we can do that, and like, it's like I'll write a really, really vulnerable song and I'll be like, wow, is this going to be too, like, how is this going to be perceived? Is this going to be too much for people? Or I write a song about sexism and I'm like, how are people going to take this? I don't know. And I always have people that say like, or like I wrote a song about abuse on my upcoming record and about my experience with abuse. And I had people come up to me afterward and like tell me, like just go into their stories about their abuse that they experienced and just how like meaningful the song was to them. And I think that, it's like, again, along the lines of that, it's like the more vulnerable you can be, the more connected. It's like we all have these issues. Yeah. We all have these. So the more you can just be like, hey, I have this issue too. Like, we're in this together. Yeah. And I can like use my platform as an artist to help people feel not alone, then that's like the goal.
Yeah. So much energy is put into the like hiding and the covering up of what are like really common or shared fears.
Yeah.
It's like being like people with you who have a platform. I feel like it's a kind of a heavy load, but to say, well, I'll go first.
Yeah.
And maybe this will like break something so that people can also go.
I talk about this with my students, like, you're gonna fail a lot, and like that's the only way to get better. So like you have to fail, and unfortunately, like being an artist, you have to like publicly fail a lot. That's how you get better, is like by creating more and like putting yourself out there more, and like learn, like being okay with the process and enjoying the process and the experience. And it's totally easier said than done. And I try to just remind myself that whenever I get into like a little bit of a spiral. And then when I start to get in a spiral, like a thing that I've found recently is like to try to share that. Like, hey, like, does anybody else feel this way? Or like, am I, like, let's talk about it. And like, I try to put that out there. Like if I like start to let those fears take over me, it's like, it's felt really empowering to like put it out there instead of like taking it in and like hiding it and like keeping it all for myself. Yeah. I always say, like, if it's vulnerable to write, like, you're doing it right. Like, that's like, I always push my students, and it's like a lesson for myself that I have. And then as far as like the world, I try to focus on what I can work on every day, what I do have control over, and I pull the people close to me that I love and care about, and I hold on to that even tighter. And I try to get involved as much as I can, and I also try to take care of myself, like, because when those fears can get really overwhelming, sometimes it's too much. Like, I have to put down the phone. I have to go into nature and like remind myself, be connected to the things that I care about more, and then I try to engage as much as I can when I can. With having conversations with people, with actively, like, I talk about what's happening, like, very regularly with all my friends. And I think it's really important that we continue to have the conversations and learn from each other. I read a lot. I try to be as inclusive actively, and I try to break up things as soon as I see them. Like, if I see something not being as inclusive, like I try to talk about it with people in productive ways that I find productive. I'm like, this last year I've really, really been focusing on how to have the most productive conversations with people, because I have the conversation all the time and sometimes my emotions get the best of me. So I've been like learning and trying to figure out what's the most productive way to have conversations with people that are more effective and can actually like move people. And also like, you know, especially like around sexism or racism or whatever, you know, it's just like in the little things that like living in white Portland like comes up really often, like, you know, where I get on a show bill, like I was on a bill, I don't want to like say too much, but I was on a bill where it was tributing a black artist, a very well-known activist black artist, and it was an all-white bill. And I got asked to do it, and I was like, yes, I love this artist. I will totally do this. And then I saw the bill, and I was like, this is so irresponsible. I have to, like, this is, like, out, like, this is not okay. And so, like, and I was, like, really upset about it at first. And then, you know, instead of just, like, dropping out of the bill or dropping out or just doing it anyway, but like feeling uncomfortable, I like really made an effort to like contact the person organizing it and being like, hey, like I feel like this is really irresponsible. Here are all the reasons why. Here are all the women that I would suggest that I think would do an amazing job, that are women of color who would more, you know, just it would be more appropriate and responsible to have women of color on the bill. How can we make this happen in the future? I'll sing less songs, or I will drop out completely to like make more space for these women. So just like really trying to like not just come at it in a way that's like, you suck, you didn't do this right. Yeah. And it's understandable for people to be angry, but like if I have the ability to like go and communicate it in a way that's most effective, and then like next year, like this woman, if she's going to be organizing this event again, could be more socially responsible about it. And just like elevating voices that aren't white voices all the time. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I strive to do, and I feel like is in my realm and my, like, you know, if I'm like, not everybody can be an activist that like dedicates their life and like, you know, to only activism in like, and I'm not a lawyer, you know, like that's not where my brain is. You're not also that? Oh, gosh. No, yeah, but like I'm not, you know, like I'm not an environmental scientist, like I'm not, you know, I can't be the leader of the NAACP, you know, like I'm just not, like I'm not that. So like what can I do in my community, and like what impact can I make, and what do I have control over, and like am I in a situation where like if I like I can say something and like I have the emotional capacity to like really sit down and like try to talk about it with somebody and like try to share with them resources and not like shame them or make them feel bad. Like how can I make a difference in this situation? That's a long answer to like, when I have these fears, I try to like focus on what it is that I can, what I do have control over. And then sometimes when it gets too overwhelming, I have to like take care of myself and take care of the people around me in the ways that I know best. It means a lot to me to like create safe space and bring people in and like take care of, I'm like an Italian mama or something. Like I love to feed people and like run them a nice warm bath and like, you know, like make sure they're warm at night. I don't know. That's like a big piece of me. how I want to interact with the world. It's just like, come, like let me feel like I always have snacks in my purse. like always like give, like, are you hungry? Did you eat today? Like you used to. And that's like fully my dad coming out. It's like a cultural thing for sure. Like don't come to my house not hungry, because like I'm gonna have like it's almost insulting if people come over and I'm like cooking and they're like full.
Yeah, I'm not gonna eat anything.
Like what? What are you doing here? Like what are you doing here? Like don't come to me having eaten. Like, you know I'm gonna try to feed you. And I'm like, there's always gotta be too much food, because most of the time too, I'm just like, I never just make food for myself. I'm like,
I don't even know if I know how. I know I can figure it out, like that's something you could teach yourself, but to this day I have a really hard time cooking in small portions.
Me too. I'm always like, somebody's gonna walk in and want this, and I live with people, and so I feed my roommates all the time. I'm always just like, hey, are you hungry? Like, I just made a bunch of extra food. I'm like texting my friends when I've like made too much food, like, just come over. Like, there's enough over here. Like, it's like food is love, so I always try to like,
a lot. And the things that when you share a meal together, what can the potential for that conversation around a meal? And like a meal is just, it's good.
Took the scissors, cut your hair, screaming on the kitchen floor. In the closet, I stayed hiding there, trying so hard to ignore the noise. You bruised me black and blue, but I still comforted you in the fall. You bruised me black and blue, but I still comforted you when it all came down. Shine a light on the corners of my mind. Shine a light on me. I was building my resistance slowly as I backed away. You came running full force at me, begging me to stay. You bruised me black and blue, but I still comforted you in the fall. You bruised me black and blue, but I still comfort